In this video, we're going to talk about spreadsheet formatting and design. And primarily, we're going to focus here on the Home tab around the font, alignment, and number sections. When we use Excel, we have a responsibility to make sure that whatever we create is easy for the user or the intended audience to read. One of the ways that we do that is by using consistent design in terms of font, alignment, number, and sometimes even these style boxes over here to the right. We'll talk more about those in a moment. Before we dig into the specifics of font and alignment on this tab, I do want to introduce you in the Page Layout tab to this Office Themes section here. This section allows you to understand what colors you might want to use, and you can customize these too. You can choose your fonts. I happen to like Arial. And you can choose how the page is set up to print. We won't go through these print options here, but this is where you would find them should you ever need to print an Excel file. Back to the Home tab, the first section has to do with font. And here you can see that we've changed everything to the Arial font, and it's size 11 across the board. The first thing that I'm noticing is that these rows look really scrunched. So what we can do is we can select all of those, right-click, choose row height, and let's make it 20. The next thing I see is across the top here, these are row headers. And to denote those as such, you can use some of these effects here, bold, italics, or underline. When you use these effects, you only want to use one treatment at a time. So for example, we wouldn't want to make something bold, italic, and underlined. We could just use the bold to denote that it's a header row. You can also choose to double underline things in addition to a single underline. The next thing we'll look at is font size. In addition to being able to change to a different font typeface, we can also change the size. We can pick a specific size, or we can use these up and down arrows to automatically move up and down between sizes. In this case, this is another example of a treatment. If something is bold already, it doesn't also need to be bold and larger. However, if we wanted to choose just a larger font size, we could remove the bold and increase the font size of our header so that it stands out from the rest of the data. Instead, we'll keep it bold and we'll leave it the regular font size. Some of the other things that we can do are fill colors. This is the background color of a cell. We can also change the text color of the text in our cells. And you want to be careful that the background and the foreground color are able to be contrasting so that you can read what's in each cell. If you click this pop-out menu here on the bottom right, it also takes you to the Format Cells font section. And here you can add additional effects like strike-through, superscript, and subscript. The next thing we'll talk about is alignment. You'll notice that when I made the rows a little bit taller, that all of the cells by default are aligned to be the bottom of the cell vertically. So what we can do is we could align them to the top, we could align them to the middle, or to the bottom. For ease of reading, I find that aligning to the middle is the most comfortable for most cases. We can also change the alignment horizontally. And the way that Excel works is it recognizes if a value is text, it automatically left aligns it. And if it's a number, it automatically right aligns it. With numbers, we always want to make sure that they are right aligned so that the units line up with each other. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the numbers section. But in this instance, we have our dates, and we'll left align those. And then we have all of our numbers, and so we'll right align all of those. Another thing that we can do is we can change the angle of our text. For example, if we wanted to angle things upwards and make the row a little bit taller, this could save us some space if we have narrow amounts of data but long headers. Usually it's not something that's used very frequently. Another thing that we can do is we can insert a new row on the top here, and let's just say we wanted to title this as Company Financials. If I wanted this title to span across all four of these columns, there's a few different ways that I could do that. One way is this merge and center option. If I merge across, you'll see it joins all the cells, but it doesn't center the data. If instead I use merge and center, it centers my header across all four of those cells. But merging cells can cause issues when it comes to using formulas, copying and pasting, and a number of other things. So one of the best things that you can do is to click this little pop-out arrow, and when you choose here, instead of horizontal being general, choose center across selection. And what that does is it centers it across all 4 of these cells, but these are still 4 distinct cells, which means that when you copy and paste, you won't run into any errors. The next thing we can notice here is some of these headers are a little bit longer than what we have space for in the cells. If we wanted to maintain a consistent column width, let's just say 10 for this exercise, and our date to be maybe 20, we notice we can't fit market share and number of employees. Now I could select these cells and I could make them much wider to show that, but then I have a lot of wasted space on the sheet. So instead, I'll choose a reasonable column width, but what I can actually do is I can choose to wrap the text, which means it allows the text to wrap around onto a second line. Now for that, I do need to accommodate it with a slightly taller row, but it allows it now to line up. The challenge we run into though is not all of the tops align now, and so in this case it might be best to align them all to the top so that as you're reading you can read them clearly. Now when it comes to number formatting, consistency is important. There are some pre-built formats in here for all sorts of different things. If we start with the date, for example, and we put it as a long date, it will write out the entire day of the week, month, date, and year. If I want to change any of these, I can select the whole range and pick one of these pre-existing number formats. I can also press Control 1, which opens up the Format Cells box, and then I can choose here, Number. And it has all of these different themes that I can pick from. There are pre-existing options for dates, or I can go to Custom, and I can use these special letters and symbols to be able to format something in a custom manner. So let's say I do want to see the day of the week. I can type in the letter D 3 times to get a 3-letter abbreviation, or if I type it in 4, it gives me the whole day. I could press comma, and it adds a comma in there. And then let's say I want the date next, and then after that the month, but I want a 3-letter month, and then after that the year, and I'll do all 4. If I click OK, that now formats everything based on that style that I've chosen. And up here you'll see it's custom. When it comes to revenue, we know that these are dollars. There are typically 2 types of dollar formats. There's this one out here that is the accounting number format. There's also the currency number format. Sometimes you have to choose to decrease the number of decimal points. Market share here is represented as a %, and I'd like to actually increase the percentage decimal points by 1. And then finally, my number of employees is a traditional number, but you'll see it's got decimal points, which are not needed, and I don't have any commas. So what if I click this comma style? It's put me back to accounting. So I actually need to click out this pop-out menu, choose number, and right here I can make sure that this is checked off to use the thousands separator, choose 0 decimal places, and when I click OK, it now includes that correctly. There are all sorts of things that you can do with number formatting. One of the examples I would give is if you have a negative number, you can determine how that number is displayed. So for example, if I have a negative 59.3 here, which is not possible in market share, but we'll use it as an example, I could go to my number, I could go to custom, and let's just say if it's a positive number, I want it to display like this. If I put a semicolon here, it now tells me if it's a negative number, how would you like it to show up? And if I put the color red, for example, in this parenthesis or in these square brackets, I can then put 0.0%, just like that, and when I click OK, it now makes it red. If I press Control 1 to get back to this, I can also change that to different colors like green. I can change it to blue, or whatever I might want to use in order to display that number. So we'll switch that back to a positive number. The next thing to point out in here is we're formatting this table to look a little bit more professional. We can go to the Page Layout tab, and again we can choose what the print area is, so if we're going to print it. We can also go to the View tab, and we can turn off the grid lines so that we don't see any of the other grid lines on the sheet. But I may still want to see each of these grid lines in this table. So if I select the whole thing, I go back to the Home tab, I can choose under Borders here all sorts of different options. If I click on More, it opens up this Format Cells box, and again, I can get there by clicking Control-1. In here, I could choose the color of the borders. Maybe we'll go with a gray. And I can choose that on the outside and inside horizontal. But let's just say I don't want inside vertical borders. I would click OK, and now you can see that that table is formatted that way. If I select that range again, press Control-1 and decide on the outside I'd like a thicker border, I can click that. You'll notice a lighter border inside with a thicker border outside. I can click OK there, and it applies that formatting as well. Now let's say I do want vertical bars, but only on this part of the table. I can choose maybe a really light line and put those as vertical. And now you can see that I've kind of got that data formatted nicely. Now revenue needs more width because of the numbers, but these two don't need as much width. So I can actually limit those down a little bit more, and they fit nicely. Here I need to choose to wrap the text so that it all fits together. I do want to format the header to be a little bit more of a standout kind of thing. I'll make the row height a little bit taller there. And so now we're having our company financials, and we'll say 1960 through 1979. This red is a little bit distracting in here. So for the background, I'm going to choose a lighter gray. And for the text color, I'm just going to choose the automatic color. Now these are just some of the formatting options that you can use in Excel. Much of this can be customized even further. And there are actually what are called cell styles over here on the right-hand side. These cell styles allow you to quickly replicate or duplicate the same type of formatting across the workbook. So for example, if you want all of your headers to look the same, you could come in here and choose this heading option. Now you'll see it overwrites any of my existing formatting. So if I select all of these cells and choose heading, that has now changed to show my financials that way. If I select these cells here and choose heading 2, you'll see it's adopted a different style. Now I may not like that. I may want something different. But there are some presets in here that can sometimes help save you time as you're seeking to format things and make them look good. Now a couple of quick notes here on how we do this formatting. First, on this first column here in the dates, you can see they're all different widths because of how the font works. This is a variable width font. So if an I is in there instead of an F, it takes up less width. We can also use what's called a fixed width or mono width font. One of those is called Courier New. And if we use Courier New, then we'll be able to see all of these line up perfectly. Sometimes when you're looking at numbers or dates and you want things to line up nicely, using one of those fixed width or mono width fonts allows you to read things more easily because the units will always line up. The ones, the tens, the hundreds, thousands, millions, etc. One of the other things that's sometimes interesting to note when it comes to border formatting here, if we go to this More Borders option, we can also do a strike through in the middle. That can be a way to show if there's data that maybe needs to be ignored, or let's just say there might not be any data in that column and we can't get it. That's one way to do that with the strike through. Another thing that I think is important to note is this Format Painter option. Let's say that you really like this format here, but you don't want to go through the menu to get to it again. You can just click it, select Format Painter, and then click on another cell and it will copy that formatting. Now in Standards of Professionalism, we talk about alignment and how things should look. One of the rules of thumb that Excel does a great job on is that numbers should be right aligned and text should be left aligned. Some people prefer their header columns to be center aligned, and to some extent it's a matter of personal preference. But you should always make sure that it's clear to the user what it is that they're looking at, and so that they don't have to hunt to understand what the data is that's being shown.